spearheaded by the Sex Pistols, sought to sweep away the tired remnants of 60s youth culture. Like most other youth movements, however, it was still very much fashion-led. To be a punk, you had to dress the part. Its chief dresser was a young Kings Road shopkeeper, Vivienne Westwood. Gillian Greenwood's film looks at the clothes and career of Vivienne Westwood, who subsequently graduated from punk to the Paris catwalk. She's remained at the forefront of fashion design since her anarchic beginnings with her then partner Malcolm McLaren, and has since proved herself Britain's most consistently inventive and original designer. She was recently cited by the American paper Women's Wear Daily, the fashion trade's Bible, as one of the 6 most influential designers in the world. Yet despite such acclaim and the unqualified praise of her peers, her work still sometimes baffles and outrages the general public. Although the fashion establishment now accepts her talent, she remains a maverick figure, still unconforming and apparently refusing to dilute her originality to suit more commercial interests. Her clothes now hang in the Victoria and Albert Museum. Some are already collector's items, but she remains a craftswoman, albeit a subversive one, who combines wit and tradition to produce something more than the latest fashion trend.
When you're little, you sort of imagine all these little romantic sort of dresses that you would like to wear. I did used to do that. But the period when I was absolutely mad about fashion was the period from about 14, when almost overnight, instead of being dressed like a child, I became dressed like a woman. And I can't think of any time in my life that was more exciting than that possibility. The whole idea of all that world of romance opening up. By virtue of how you dressed, it was the dressing up that probably was the most important.
She came from the Snake Pass. She was terrified of the phone and would only wish to join forces that were going to get her out of being a housewife in the suburbs.
Ladies and gentlemen, that spooky but talented couturier, Vivienne Westwood!
I have a kind of inbuilt sort of clock which always reacts against anything orthodox.
Lovely. Well, what a striking little figure you are, Viv. Gorgeous little possum, too.
If you sat like a little monkey at a typewriter for 100 years, you couldn't invent her.
Things like this are reminiscent of Greek peasant costumes, this little kilt.
She wants to go over the top, if you like. She wants people to use their bodies and to be proud in their clothes and to see them as fun.
I don't look like a chick job, I look like a fairy.
It depends what you want. If you want all the men on the building site to whistle at you, just wear it and you get a reaction.
What's most important about Vivienne is her lack of regard for people's morality or taste.
Are people supposed to laugh? I mean, they're laughing at us.
I think she feels great, and I don't think they should laugh, really. I've always been interested in the idea of the Queen. It's part of my little history as well, because I was involved with the Sex Pistols and the Queen with the safety pin through her lip.
She introduced to strengthen the powers of the police in combating disorder.
God save the Queen! The fascist regime!
In those days, I felt that the Queen was absolutely typical of English hypocrisy.
President Chesterfield's wish for international...
I was outraged at her entertaining foreign prime ministers, diplomats, you know, when their country was when that country would be torturing people to death. That whole sort of punk period was an exercise for me in trying to undermine the establishment. The Queen is trying to flatter us all that she's just like everybody else. And so the Queen has always been seen with her family or the little children. In fact, they're not like everybody else. What the royal family should do is patronise art, culture and science. And it's very encouraging to see that Prince Charles is that way inclined. The inspiration for one very important collection was a photograph of the Queen when she was a little girl, and she had the sweetest little coat on, little princess line coat. And I took that idea for the shape of my coats. The Queen now is at the height of fashion, and she has kept the same style for a long time. In fact, she's at the avant-garde of fashion, and people who feel themselves to be outside of fashion or even above fashion have to be careful. You know, if they're not careful, they can suddenly find themselves thrust at the front of it when things come sort of full circle. Born in a row of cottages between two villages in Cheshire, very near to Derbyshire. When I finally went to grammar school, I just went 3 miles away, and that was in Derbyshire. I remember it wasn't cool to answer questions. People, they knew the answer to things, like nobody would put their hand up. But I had no patience with that. I'd always put my hand up and answer all the questions. My parents moved from the north of England, and they moved to Harrow. And I went to Harrow Art School for a term, and then I left. I left because I was working class, and I wanted to earn my own living and be a responsible adult. And I didn't know how I was going to do it by staying at art school. It seemed a little dicey. That you might actually be able to, that I might be able to support myself as a painter. So what I did is I took a course at Teacher Training College.
Hey little sister, who's your Superman? Hey little sister, who's the one you want? Hey little sister, shotgun. It's a nice day to start again. It's a nice day for a white wedding. It's a nice day to start again.
I was a friend of her younger brother's, and I would meet her when I left my middle-class home to live in the back of his car. And I just remember her wheeling a pram past me in the morning to her mum's, and peeping in the window of the car and waking me up. That's when I first met her. And I thought, who's that?
Well, I was making clothes for myself as a teenager. I could make clothes. I learnt to do it by playing around with butterick patterns, basically. And when Malcolm McLaren, who I would be 20, I don't know, in my 20s, mid-20s, I helped Malcolm McLaren in a career that he had in mind, and I started making clothes to help him.
And I was rather fond of her because I felt that she was desperately looking for something to do other than wheel that pram. And lo and behold, it was pretty obvious after her going to church and on Sundays or whatever else she did at the time, that she was just trying to escape from her husband.
Malcolm had been to several art colleges and was looking for something to earn money from. I had been a school teacher in my relationship with him. I was older than he was.
I was living with her brother in a house with a bunch of ex-Vietnam draft dodger blokes. And she came along with her belongings and this child, who was now, I think, about 3 or 4 years of age, to live there, having left her husband. And it wasn't long after that that I found myself very craftily in her bed.
We were looking for motives of rebellion. Malcolm got onto the idea of sexual confrontation. And so the obvious thing was leather, bondage gear, rubberware. We sold all those things in our shop. Malcolm's slogan, and he really meant it, was rubberware for the office. And I used to walk around in rubberware, whatever.
She would follow on any wheeze or whim or fancy I had. And I think fundamentally believed in me. And thought it was all fascinating and fantastic, and would immediately assemble herself on a Saturday night in a giant condom, you know, that was like a see-through latex suit. No, totally jump in at the deep end. Her sense of commitment was brilliant.
McLaren and Westwood, I thought, were a team. They were an ensemble. They were part of a movement, whatever that might be. And her role, it's rather like those books with covers that say, "And the women who loved them." Her role was to do the clothes, and she was jolly clever at doing that, and she had a funny line in chat too. But she was part of the movement. The movement's ideals and rhetoric were already there, and she clothed it. And so Vivienne dressed the lads to go out and kill, and that really was important.
Malcolm and I had researched street fashion to such an extent that we actually invented one of our own. We'd been so interested in cults that we invented a cult of our own, and that was punk rock. And no one saw that until the Sex Pistols, just a week or two before our shop was opened, and the shop had all the punk gear in. And then kids bought it or copied some of it themselves. But it wasn't invented from the streets, it was the other way around.
At one point or another, having gone around and bought old clothes and set up a shop called Let It Rock in 1971, I decided I wanted to concoct some things myself, either recut things or rework things or slam a slogan on something or customize stuff. And Vivienne being totally craft and me being very art formed a kind of an alliance in which she did all the bloody work and I did all the folderols and ideas and all the stuff that lazy buggers like people like me do.
Malcolm was not a craftsperson. He didn't know how to actually make something. perhaps he could have done, but as I could do it, I was the one who actually practically made things. And often when I took them to a certain stage, Malcolm would get me to try them on and start pulling them around.
It wasn't designing clothes on a bust. The techniques came out more of out of painting more than out of direct concern with the rules and regulations of making clothing. Because Vivienne was not taught. I was a painter and shrugged off most of whatever I knew. I mean, I did have a whole vocabulary of understanding of textiles and cloth, and I knew where to go. But that wasn't the side of it that I was interested in. It was more the sloganizing and the concocting of damage-driven clothes, you know?
I made the bondage trousers, and then he, absolutely brilliantly, put the strap round the leg.
I came up with the idea, well, you know, you've got to tie the legs together, so we've got to form a strap around the kneecaps. We should have a zip that wouldn't ordinarily end at your balls, but would go right up your bum. So you could immediately undo the zip and the whole goddamn lot would just fall out.
And he just said that we should attach this little flap thing on the back, and he was right. I remember asking him what the toweling flap was supposed to be, and he didn't know. He just thought that it was right, that we should put a flap on the back. I said it should be out of toweling for some reason. He wanted to give a suggestion of something tribal, something looking like a loincloth.
So all those things were obviously anti the High Street, anti even the King's Road. Had never been seen before.
Just as we've been disillusioned with teddy boys as not being terribly interesting in the end, etc., we became disillusioned with punk. The thing that really did it for me was when I heard the Clash boasting that they'd never lived, any of them, lower down than 5 stories high, and they seemed to think that that was a great badge of working class credibility, and I just didn't want to be in this tunnel with this kind of dull attitude.
I thought that she definitely wanted to be a designer now. There was a desire to continue to live together, but something that was a strain upon me emotionally at the time. And yet I felt a certain allegiance to try and get involved again in fashion, but this time from the point of really addressing Vivienne as a designer now.
At that time, my shop lease was ready to be given up, and I decided to keep it because I realised already how much punk had influenced the world of fashion. The pret-a-porter cat shows were already starting to wear things that I'd designed. And I thought I was good enough, and I decided to enter the world of fashion as a designer and to do a catwalk show. This was planned. And when people asked me what I was going to do, I said I didn't know, but I knew it was going to be romantic. Malcolm, by that time, was working more on the music side of things.
Every day I get a brand new show off TV, radio.
And he was interested in pirate radio. And for that reason, the romantic theme that I chose was the one of pirates.
The idea of having a fashion show was a completely new avenue, and to project Vivienne this time and put myself in the background was the cause that I gave myself. Using Adam and the Ants, Bow Wow Wow, Boy George, and all the other groups that I worked with around the shop to aid and abet and parade that look.
The pirate would go into the world just as the punk had done. He would get out of this underground tunnel. and he would get it into the world and become very, very colourful and plunder the world historically.
I changed Vivienne's clothes to incorporate that notion of pirate and get bright colours, thinking Errol Flynn and the high seas and blue skies, and forget your dark streets and the rain and all of that. That was all part of the sex show. This was going to be bright colours, sparkling and gaudy.
I started to look at the shapes of old patterns, and they're completely different. Trousers that were made a couple of 100 years ago, the shape of them from a modern trouser. And I found what I was looking for, because the old trouser had a baggy bum. Instead of having a concave seam at the centre back, it had a convex seam at the centre back. And that's what I needed. I needed all that bagginess round the bum. I mean, I got a kind of sculpture shape eventually. I think I made about 20 attempts before I got it right.
People are sometimes quite taken aback that we've got Vivienne Westwood clothes in the Victoria and Albert Museum, but she is an extremely important designer. Youngsters didn't walk round London dressed in the whole ensemble, but in fact what happened was that they took elements from the romantic buccaneer look, like the snake print tunic or the square-toed shoes. She would take an idea and then chew it over and shake it and come up with the most extraordinary results. Results which are influential, which other designers see, and it sinks in what she's done.
What's going on with the fly?
Well, that's quite fascinating. An asymmetrical fly which really has very little relation to European tradition of dress.
Malcolm tried those trousers on a lot of times. He used to always say, "You never loved me, because if you did, you'd always find me something to wear."
And I suppose one can link it with the codpiece in the sense that it draws attention to a naughty bit or to an erogenous limb.
He would often try those trousers on and always take them off, and it was about 2 years before he finally wore a pair.
You know, this is not here, really.
You have to look at the 20th century in terms of clothing and music going side by side. And you have in the 20s the flapper dress, you know, you have that happening. Then in the 30s you have Madame Vivienne, who makes the incredibly body-conscious, sensual clothes which fitted the music of the time. Then you have Vivienne and Malcolm putting the two together in the 70s. I see the similarities between Madame Vivienne and Vivienne as being, the two of them are great deconstructivists, in as much as before Madame Vivienne, you know, clothes were very much more structured. They were very overworked. And Madame Vivienne took a strip of fabric and cut across it, which had the effect of, it's what's called the bias. It's a very, very important point in fashion history. Vivienne, when she comes along, does very much the same. She squashes the barriers of fashion. She cuts right through it. She alters the whole way that clothes are perceived, certainly by fashion cognoscenti, and you know, that will filter down.
Vivienne at that time desperately wanted to loosen the ties with me because she always felt that she was running one step behind me. It wasn't a scene she wanted anymore, it was to be classified as a designer and go into the flock of designers and compete with them. I had no longer a relationship with Vivienne on a personal basis of living with her. I had other interests, personally, towards the attitude of perhaps entering movies. And the whole thing came to a head for me, I guess, in a key moment in Paris after I created this buffalo gal look with Vivienne and realised I'd better get down and do some serious work myself. And so, you know, took that plane to Hollywood.
And it's a hard rain gonna fall.
I think that Vivienne has changed since that breakup, but more important, people's perceptions of what she's capable of delivering have changed. And she's now seen as a designer, a legitimate designer, if a rather extraordinary one.
The creation of all those shops, Let It Rock, Too Fast to Live, Too Young to Die, Sex, Dictionaries, Clothes for Heroes, World's End, Nostalgia of Mud. They were all paintings, really. They weren't about selling anything, to be honest.
The shop in St. Christopher's Place was quite beautiful, and it was the first shop of its kind in London, I think, and was enormously influential. And what they dummy ran was the idea that a shop could be a theatre. People in fashion, which is very big business, love to think that what they do is art, but of course it isn't. It isn't art in the sense of fine arts, and I don't think she thinks what she does is art. I think she thinks it's a medium for whatever her polemic is.
Vivienne's clothes could hang in her shops, but don't necessarily need to be bought. That turns fashion into something else. I daren't call it art or sculpture, but it hangs there waiting for someone to be inspired by to do something else.
Everything I do, I start from an intellectual point. As far as I know, I'm the only fashion designer who really cares so much to analyse what they do in broader cultural terms. That's the only way that I can stimulate my intelligence. For the past 5 seasons, I have designed my collections under the main title of Britain Must Go Pagan. By pagan, I mean the age of classical and Hellenistic Greece. I believe that we live in an age which is very uncivilized. It's less civilized than pagan Greece. Those Greeks believed in cultivating skepticism. They believed that Opinions should be formed on the basis of fact, rather than emotion or passion.
I think that Vivienne has a very strong Jean Brodie quality. She's always keen on leading people out to the light. And so ancient Greece, pagan Greek love stuff, as transmuted through a screen of Edwardian writing, is what she's on about now.